Hey everybody, it's Kate, the West Coast Paper Crafter, and you are joining me for Project 2 of my Reindeer Fun card class at home. I will be using the Reindeer Fun stamps and dies for this project, but you can use whatever you have in your stash. All right, so to begin, we'll go through the measurements. To start out, I've got a pool party card base. Now this is 5.5 by 8.5, and it's scored at 4 1/4 on the 8.5 inch side. Oops. Then I've got a Blueberry Bushel layer. This is 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. A basic white layer. This is 4 by 5 1/4. A piece of Designer Series paper from the Nests of Winter pack. This is 3 3/4 by 4. And a die cut from the Nested Essential Dies. And this is, if you don't have this die cut, just cut a piece of cardstock to 2 1/8 by 1 1/2, and that will work out just fine. So for this card, I made a mistake, so I need 2 pieces of the basic white. So I'm just going to quickly cut one more piece. It'll just take me a second, and this is going to be for the inside layer of the card. So that is just 5 1/4 by 4. All right, I think we are ready. So to start out, we are just going to do a little bit of die cutting and embossing. So I'm going to grab my cut and emboss machine, and be warned, this is going to shake the table. Oh, I'm just getting a little bit of feedback from my computer. I fixed that. Okay, so I grabbed my cut and emboss machine. I am going to use the fancy little bow die. I'm going to call it a bow die, like some bows, tree bows, from the Reindeer Fun dies. And what I want to do is I'm going to cut this out on more to the bottom of my layer. And I'm going to have the tree boughs on the top. All right, so I'm going to try to cut this gently so it doesn't shake the camera too bad. And then once we've got this cut out, then we're going to emboss it as well. Okay, I'll get that out of the way. And if you've done it like me, it will look kind of like this. I'm just going to poke out some of these little pieces that didn't come out when I took the die out. My Take Your Pick is super handy to get all those little pieces out. There, that looks great. Now I'm going to change my plates and grab the Forever Plaid 3D embossing folder. I'm going to pop this piece right into the folder. And I always run my folders fold first. That helps maintain the life of your folders. And then I'm just going to roll this through, and we're going to emboss this piece. All right, I'm going to get this out of the way. And there you go. Our piece looks like this. All right, now all we have to do is put our card together. So that is probably the hardest part of making this card. So I am going to take my Blueberry Bushel and my piece of Designer Series paper from the Nests of Winter. I'm going to glue this down onto the bottom part of my layer. And before I glue it, I just want to make sure that where I placed it, all the Designer Series paper is going to show through. So once I have an idea where I'm going to glue it, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to use Tombow, but you use whatever you like. And if your glue leaches out a bit, not a big deal, because we're going to cover most of the, well, we're going to cover all the edges with our white layer. Okay, so I'm going to just set that aside for a minute and add some real red and white baker's twine to the top of this emboss layer. So I want to wrap it around twice and leave enough tails so I can easily tie a bow. I'm going to tie my bow to the right side of the card, but it's totally your preference where you like to place your bows or if you tie a bow at all. If you have reverse tweezers, they're handy to help you tie bows. I don't happen to know where mine are, but they're very likely to be right in front of me. Okay, so I've got that down. Now, just to secure that so it's not sliding around, I'm going to add just a little bit of tear and tape to the back to hold that in place. And while I have that turned over, I'm going to grab my dimensionals and add some to the four corners of this layer. And one right on top of where that die cut is. And then I'm also going to add some dimensionals to the side. So I'm going to use minis because I have less space, but if you don't have minis, then you can just cut your dimensionals in half and that'll work just as fine. And pull the backing off with my handy take your pick tool. Did I get them all? I think so. Just make sure. Yeah, okay. So now the tricky part is lining this up because we don't have a lot of border. It's only about a 1/16 of an inch once you get this down. So you just want to get your head right over top before you commit and line it up the best you can. So your border is even as possible on all sides. All right, I'm a little bit off, but, oh, I left a backing on, but not too bad. I'm happy with that. Okay, we're going to glue this to our card front, and then we're going to decorate the front of the card a little bit, and we're almost done. Okay, so this deer I've die cut from the Reindeer Days Designer Series paper. If you don't have the die cuts, it's easy enough to fussy cut. So this is going to be partially popped up and partially glued. So wherever the body, wherever they covered this blue DSP, I'm going to add a dimensional there. So if I want my deer like so, I'm only going to put glue on the back legs of the big deer and then a little bit of glue on the hooves for the rest of these little critters. And then the rest is going to be dimensional. So I'll use minis for the small deer. And then the bigger deer, I'm pretty sure I can get away with my larger dimensionals. That should be good. And then just a tiny little bit of glue, just so it's not flopping around on the front of my card. All right, to get the backings off. And got them all? Yes. Okay. Oh, and a tiny little bit of glue on the tail too. Perfect. All right. So I'm just going to gently push down where I've got the glue on their hooves. Make sure everything is going to stick. All right, now stamping. I'm using Blueberry Bushel ink and a sentiment from the Reindeer Fun stamp set. Christmas is better together. And I'm just going to stamp that sentiment on my little die cut. And of course, close up this ink pad before I drop my card in it or stick my finger in it or whatever I tend to do. I'm just going to let that dry for a second. I find that darker colors, I tend to smudge them. So I'm going to let that dry, and while that's drying, I'm going to add some adhesive backed peppermints to this card in a random pattern, just wherever I think it's going to look cute. One more right there. And then some small ones on my sentiment piece. I'm going to flip that over, and I am going to add some dimensionals to the bottom and top, but not the middle, because I'm going to layer this over top of the real red and white baker's twine. So you can choose if you want it in the middle or off to the side. I tend to put things more off to the side, but there's no wrong way to do this. I'm not quite as straight as I want it to be. I'm just going to try to gently lift that up and try one more time. Sometimes when you can pull them up and it's easy enough to do, but I find I need to just re-bend my paper, because when I pull them up I get a little bit of a bend. There, that's better. All right, front of the card is done. Now I'm just, because I like to add more layers, I'm going to add a white layer to the inside of the card, and probably before I send this card out I might add a little bit of stamping just so it's not naked on the inside. But that is a personal preference, how you like the insides of your card. All right, there is project 2. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial, and tune in for project number 3.